From APM, American Public Media.
The Jacksonville Music Experience presents indie rock band Shannon and the Clams, performing live on the WJCT soundstage on Saturday, April 12th at 7 p.m. Tickets and more information at jacksmusic.org/JME events.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schendler, and on today's First Coast Connect, it's the biggest stories of the week. School districts stand to lose millions under a state plan to strip funding for AP programs. The sheriff asks the FBI to investigate a jail incident that left an inmate on life support. City lawmakers ban food trucks near gas stations. The squalid Regency Square Mall gets a new lease on life, and an official investigation of the St. Augustine Airport gets underway. We'll talk about all that and more with our panel of journalists on our Friday Week in Review. Later, food and live music are in evidence at the second annual Justice Jams. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. China has again retaliated for President Trump's latest tariffs on imported Chinese products. This week, Trump boosted U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods to 145%. China says it's now increasing its tariffs on U.S. products to 125%. Some lawmakers are insisting on a greater role for Congress in President Trump's trade actions. Indiana Republican Senator Todd Young says he wants more clarity on what Trump is doing. But he points out there are security issues at stake, too. Young says U.S. pharmaceutical companies rely on China for many active ingredients they put into their medications.
They are able to threaten to withhold these inputs into our manufacturing economy. That undermines our health security, and it could conceivably undermine our national security if we were in a time of conflict. So I know that's why President Trump is determined to reorder our trade relations with China so that we can become more resilient and avoid these things in the future.
He spoke to NPR's Morning Edition. Democratic members of two independent agencies protecting workers' rights have once again been removed from their seats. This time it's due to an order from Chief Justice John Roberts. NPR's Andrea Hsu reports.
The two members are Gwen Wilcox of the National Labor Relations Board and Kathy Harris of the Merit Systems Protection Board. President Trump fired both in the first few weeks of his administration. Wilcox and Harris sued, citing federal law and Supreme Court precedent that hold that they can only be fired for cause. Ever since, it's been a yo-yo of a legal battle. Twice already, judges have ordered them returned to their seats. But now, Chief Justice Roberts has temporarily halted those orders, while the Supreme Court considers the Trump administration's formal request for a review of the lower court decisions. Without the two members, both boards lack a quorum, hampering some of their core functions. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
The Trump administration is further backing off from a plan that would have required many Americans to travel to a Social Security field office for in-person service. NPR's Ashley Lopez reports the change was supposed to take effect Monday.
A spokesperson for the White House says in a statement to NPR that telephone services will continue for people seeking Social Security benefits. Last month, agency officials announced people would have to travel in person to a local office if they were unable to use the agency's online verification system. The policy would have effectively eliminated widely used telephone services for many beneficiaries. But White House officials say the agency's anti-fraud team has improved technological capabilities, allowing workers to identify by fraud on claims over the telephone. Advocates are applauding the reversal, which came after intense public pressure against the proposed changes. Ashley Lopez, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. A Nassau County church secretary is behind bars charged with embezzling more than $500,000. WJCT News 89.9's Dan Scanlon has more on what led up to Wednesday's arrest.
44-year-old Melissa Gainey English was the financial secretary at Amelia Baptist Church from 2019 to 2024. Church leaders were reviewing bank statements when they noticed some irregularities. A subsequent investigation by the Nassau County Sheriff's Office uncovered thousands of dollars in personal credit card payments, hotel stays, airline tickets, even a helicopter flight over the Grand Canyon. English has been charged with grand theft and the unlawful use of the church's credit card to the tune of nearly $600,000. Dan Scanlon, WJCT News 89.9.
English was tracked down and arrested in Baker County. She will be extradited to Nassau County to stand trial. A South Florida art dealer and another man face charges involving the sale of fake Andy Warhol artworks. According to an indictment, Leslie Roberts claimed fake artworks were original Andy Warhol's and that he transferred $250,000 in proceeds from his Miami Fine Art Gallery bank account to a personal bank account. Roberts' partner, Carlos Rodriguez Melendez, is accused of pretending to be an expert with a New York-based auction company to authenticate the fake artwork as the real deal. The pair were arrested on Wednesday. Sunny and breezy today here in Jacksonville with highs in the lower 80s inland, upper 70s to the coast, and this evening a chance for storms.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kauffman.org.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and it's Friday, which means it's time for the First Coast Connect First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, teachers and parents rally to save AP programs after state lawmakers move to slash funding. A jail incident leaves an inmate dead and 9 officers under federal investigation. Food truck owners protest a new ban near gas stations. Regency Square Mall is now slated to become a nexus of residential and retail development, and prosecutors begin a criminal probe into the St. Augustine Airport Authority. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by Nate Monroe, executive editor of the Tributary. You got a promotion. Good morning, Nate.
Good morning, Ann.
Also, Jack Webb, attorney and former City Council president. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
Jim Piggott, former City Hall reporter at WJXT News4Jax. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Also, Tiffany Salome, consumer investigative reporter, still at WJXT News4Jax. Nice to have you.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks.
So I want to start, if we can, with a proposal that has been getting a lot of attention from parents around the state here as well, that would slash funding for accelerated programs in schools, including AP, International Baccalaureate, Cambridge, dual enrollment, ACE, and career and professional education, a huge swath of advanced curriculum for students, and something that could severely impact futures of a lot of kids who are headed to college. So, Jim, I want to start with you if I can. These proposals are making their way through both houses of the legislature with some success already. Schools say this could just devastate their programs.
And they every right, I think, to do so. What they're saying, what's happening, the $8 million for these programs that they want to cut. I mean, I always remember when I was in school, I wasn't able to go to some of these programs, but I always admired the students that did. And the ones that did, like the baccalaureates, all those type of programs, they did well in the future. I think this is something that is actually needed, something that to cut this, I think is ridiculous. And that's what schools are pointing out right now, that these programs are definitely needed, particularly for those students that are college bound. Like here in Duval County, it's $8 million. compared to their whole entire budget, it just doesn't seem that much. What their budget is $2.5 billion. I think these programs are essential. I'm amazed that this is even being considered.
Yeah, and he says, 8 million in Duval County, Tiffany, St. Johns County alone, looking at 7 million worth of impacts. This is something that is a career readiness, but it's also, technical preparedness for kids who maybe even aren't college bound. There's all kinds of tech programs, including things like, manufacturing and skills, like hairdressing. I don't think they call it anymore, but kind of in that line.
Right. And $8 million already when the district, at least Duval County, is facing, budget constraints, and they're already looking at restructuring schools. I mean, that's a big hit. And then these programs as well, the students they benefit are the lower and middle class students. They take advantage of these AP courses, ACE courses, IB courses, and the reason being is they can get a head start on college and it's free for them. So, I mean, we had students reach out to our newsroom. I think it was 10 students from Wolfson High School who were so concerned, and they were talking about how these programs have benefited them. Some of them even just sophomores in high school talking about, hey, this program specifically helped me start a business with my friend. I mean, the stories they had and the benefits that were offered to them as a result of these programs and the AP courses, I mean, it was really apparent.
I saw that segment, and those kids were really great ambassadors for their school and for these programs. But to her point, Jack, I mean, this is a real cost savings for kids who are doing dual enrollment. This is it's money in their pocket if they're able to get college credits before they have to start paying for them.
Really interesting. By way of full disclosure, my son Eamon was an IB student at IB program at Stanton, and now he's going to law school in D.C. So, and as well, when I was a senior in high school in Fort Pierce, Florida, I did dual enrollment, and I got a free year of college education at Indian River Community College. That said, this is really disheartening in that it's another shot across the bow, another effort to kind of destabilize, degrade public education, because not only is this attractive to, lower income families and it gives them a leg up, it's also, you're going to create affluent flight. I'm not going to call it white flight, but, you get on a Mandarin, and a lot of the kids in Mandarin are there because of the AP program. You start crippling these programs, these parents have the money to go somewhere else, right? So again, it's the rationale that I saw in the Senate bill and the House bill was, all right, we're already funding this, but the money's not being properly allocated. Really? Okay. I don't buy that, because it seems to me that the outcry is statewide. It's not just a local issue. So who is benefiting here? I mean, what are the politics of Tallahassee? Why are efforts now being made not only to, once again, to I guess, what does the charter school industry have to do in any of this?
Do you want to answer that?
Do you think charter schools are going to benefit from this?
Well, certainly, I mean, these programs are the kind of thing that draw students to traditional public schools. It's one of their marketing tools to, bring in, dedicated, high-achieving students and to retain some that might otherwise explore private schools or charter schools, Nate. So how does a cut like this that seems so unpopular with schools, with teachers, with parents even begin?
That's a very good question. And I mean, look, I didn't do any reporting on this story. I'm a consumer of it. I'm basically just a reader of it, like lots of parents. And I think the thing that is frustrating, and I suspect frustrates others about this and other things Tallahassee does, is, there are some obvious downsides to these cuts that seem very clear. The benefits do not seem clear. And the rationale, as Jack said, it's not obvious. Like, you read these stories and you read these quotes from these lawmakers, and it's just like government bureaucrat nonsense, like something about allocating funding improper. Like, it just doesn't pass like a basic smell test, And so, like, I suspect that is what people, probably find frustrating about, these particular cuts. But this is also the kind of thing that I think frustrates people about government generally. This is something that is working fine. What is the compelling reason for changing this at all?
Got a message from Katie on Facebook. She says, thanks for covering the education funding cuts. Senator Davis and Representative Nixon are the only two Duval elected leaders who voted the bills down on Wednesday. I was at the Capitol this week and I feel completely gaslit by some legislators. These cuts are an attack on working families and the majority of Florida students like mine in our public schools. The question we should be asking is why. It's rhetorical to me, and this is to drive more kids out of our public schools. Republicans continue to expand voucher funding while defunding our public schools. It's shameful. This, there has been a discussion, Jim, about this money wouldn't entirely be leaving the arena of public education, that it would sort of be instead redirected to the pure pupil funding element of schools. So it would attach to the student, but these are basically bonuses that schools receive when the students who are in these programs perform well, and they use it to pay for the program. So if they're kind of going into this other fund, they wouldn't necessarily come back in a school district that has so many unfunded needs right now. They wouldn't necessarily come back to these programs.
And I think that's important, as you're pointing out, because that's what we hear, what's happening all the time. And I think what we had mentioned, and I always look at this, I'm going, I think this is a way to boost charter schools. And I mean, when you look at the bottom line of this, and it's a shame that really is happening. I mean, the charter schools, yes, they serve a purpose, but so do public schools. And I hate to see what's happening with that, with charter schools going into these private businesses, and they're the ones, somebody's making money from that.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing to see.
I mean, charters are for-profit enterprises as opposed to public schools.
Yeah, and public schools were just watching things dwindle, and this is one part of it, and I think that's a shame to see what's happening.
Nate.
Yeah, something interesting. Lawmakers like to treat the education system different than they treat all the other government systems. In education, you hear this all the time that, we want the money to follow the student. We fund students. We don't fund systems, but we fund systems all the time. And, the thing about education that I always just find kind of amusing, we fund an entire rather large police department in this city, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Why do you never hear council members say, like, well, I want, the money should follow individual people, not systems. Do we all get a security grant? We can go purchase private security and kind of opt out of JSO if we don't like it. Like, no, that's not how our society works. And so I've never really understood why education should be any different than that.
That's interesting. We've got a call from Mark on the west side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
I know this isn't necessarily on topic, but I think AP should be done away with. I understand the desire for a lot of parents to save a couple of $1,000 here and there as they fund their kid through college. But I had a kid in IB and I had a kid in AP, and I should be arrested for child abuse. It was horrible. It takes these 15-year-old kids and thrusts them into an environment where my kids studied nonstop from the moment they got home from school till 9 and 10 at night, Monday through Friday at least, sometimes Saturday and Sunday. I mean, this is the last time in their lives that they'll have a little time to grow up and be children. And it was just murder. And again, I saved a couple $1,000 here. I got one kid in the Coast Guard and one guy as the nurse. It's questionable that that they're a more or less rounded person because they had these. I mean, they were doing college level studying. They did more studying in their 2 last years of high school than I did in college, and it just was high pressure, and they don't need that, and it shouldn't be something we even think about, really.
Interesting perspective, Mark. Thank you for your call. We have a call from Les on the west side. Good morning, Les. Go ahead.
Good morning. Interesting topic. I would just like to ask if anybody has ever looked into the possibility that the state does not want to be in education business. Thank you.
I think that's sort of what Nate was referring to in terms of, the idea that we could be divesting ourselves from the obligation to be providing a service as opposed to, something like public safety where there is less question about whether that's an accepted path.
Yeah, it is objectively true that Florida is moving away from traditional public education. Now, there are lots of people who support that, but that is happening. Like what we are seeing is that sea change happen in real time. We are going from a kind of consensus that public education should be, widely available, that it should not vary much in its quality. It should be equitable to a much more fragmented system of private schools and charter schools and a very diminished public school system. And all of that means that there will be a lot of those schools are going to vary a lot in their quality.
Jack.
Yeah, a couple points. I want to respond to what Mark said, and I guess I got some personal insight as to that. As I said, my second son, Eamon, went to Stanton. He's right. I mean, Mark is right about the level, the intensity of it. Sometimes, I do believe that when he got out of Stanton, he was burned out. I mean, he was totally burned out on it. Whatever. He's doing very, very well. Don't get me wrong, but you look at it. It was a lot, and especially commuting every day from Mandarin down to Stanton. So, but that said, what I find interesting and nefarious about the bill as well is the fact that the funding is based on projections. Funding's based on projections, and if the projections aren't correct, and actually your enrollment's higher, then I don't think there's a mechanism to make up the missing. Like you say, Nate, it's supposed to follow the students. It's following a projection of students. So if you actually have more students than what's projected, why wouldn't the state write a check for the remainder? That's going to come out of general revenue, though. So I'll just raise that issue as well.
Tiffany, you were about to make a point.
Yeah, and if the estimates are too low, right,
right.
the funding would then be cut. But another thing about AP and IB classes, I mean, it's a choice, right? So when you're enrolling in school, it's a student's and a parent's choice. You do have to sit for long exams, and in turn, if you pass them, you get your college credit. But I mean, if that's something that benefits you financially and it's something you don't have to pay for, a lot of parents are going to be willing to do that. And I know even I it's personal for me too. I have lots of siblings, and many of them benefited from AP and ACE classes, dual enrollment. And I think that it does become personal at some point.
It's interesting because I know that your station reported as well that, Clay Yarborough, who is a senator who serves on the Senate Appropriations Committee on pre-K through 12 education, Jim, also was a recipient of this kind of programming. He went to Frank Peterson. He graduated in a TV production program. He actually worked here for a while doing TV production at WJCT years ago. So, he would have a perspective, I guess, of greater understanding. There are also 3 high schools that are entirely dedicated to career accelerated programs in the district, and 3 that are entirely dedicated to technical accelerated programs. So those schools would be really dynamically impacted.
And I think that's what we really have to watch is what's going to happen to those technical schools. That's, as we mentioned here, so important to those students later on. My question is, though, I have a question with your son. Was it his choice to do that?
That's a great question.
Or did you make him?
I didn't make him do anything, but I just told him, I said, listen, dude, this is like getting drafted by the NFL, at this age, right? I mean, getting in because he wasn't part of a feeder school. He had a test in. And so I said, this is quite an accomplishment, and it's an opportunity, so it's your call. But he said, oh, okay, I'll do it. But I think obviously there was some subtle pressure, obviously.
And as the caller Mark had mentioned too, that's what I'm going, in school at least, I wouldn't get into those courses, I know, but it would have been a choice if I wanted to do it. And yes, I would have liked to have done that. I wish I could have, but I wasn't smart enough.
Yeah, well, I doubt that.
That's why we're in journalism.
Yeah.
We've got a call from Omar on the west side. Good morning, Omar. Go ahead.
Good morning. In my opinion, the United States is the world's leader in incarceration, and the population that fuels the incarceration and the justice system are poor folks and minorities. And when you take away opportunities and close schools and plan on building new prisons, they project for those things, so that's what I believe it's about. Assaulting these schools or diminishing these students' chances to get out of whatever situation they're in.
Thanks, Omar. Appreciate it. We also have a call from Janet at the Beaches. Good morning, Janet. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. the MAGA agenda is to completely destroy the public school system in favor of private schools that will have religious teachings and indoctrinate the children to keep them in power. And once the public schools are gone, the private schools don't have to accept your children. There'll be waiting lists. This is the agenda. We have five radical right-wing MAGA people on the school board at the moment. They've already closed schools in Jacksonville. They want the public school system destroyed completely. Do not be fooled, Jacksonville. Watch who you vote for.
Thanks, Janet. Well, there's lots of good information, I know, on the News4Jax website about how to contact your lawmakers if you're interested. So look that up if it's an issue that you care about. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the week's headlines with our panel of media experts, joined by Jack Webb, Nate Monroe, Tiffany Salome, and Jim Piggott. And you can join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on social media. You can watch our live stream now on Facebook or YouTube. I want to move on now to an incident that has a lot of people talking that occurred at the Duval County Jail this week. A man declared dead yesterday after suffering catastrophic injuries Monday. Jack, since Monday, he's been brain dead. And so this is something that we learned about from the sheriff this week with limited information, but we do know that he's asked for a federal investigation for the FBI to step in. This is something that in your line of work, you have, kind of tracked incidents like this and certainly covered incidents like this. So what are you seeing happening?
I think that this may be the arrow that just kind of pierced the armor somewhat for the sheriff to feel compelled, whether self-directed or directed externally, to request FBI assistance is very, very significant. We didn't go to the FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement. He went directly to the FBI, and I'm not, obviously he went to the state attorney's office, said we got an issue here, and at that point it escalated very, very quickly. 9 suspensions, 8 officers, 1 sergeant. I think that the FBI involvement is I guess the question I have for any FBI involvement is, what is the level of investigation that this ultimately results in? Is it limited to this particular issue? Is it limited to other corrections issues? Is it limited to the use of canines? Does it involve illegal strip searches? Does it involve pretextual traffic stops that result in illegal searches of vehicles? What is the level of scrutiny that will be brought to bear by the federal authorities? Now, and God bless the sheriff, because this stuff has been going on for a while. Anecdotally, I can speak to it. I won't, because I could go on for days, but it's been going on for a while.
When you say it's been going on, what are we talking about?
It predates. I remember when I was a baby lawyer years ago trying to get somebody out of jail, the niece of an attorney I was working with, an African-American woman. I remember the level of difficulty that I dealt with the corrections department, corrections officers. Was not a pretty situation. And, last year I did a public records request for an inmate who was beaten up by corrections and resulted in he was cuffed at the time, resulted in a broken arm, broken wrist, and the public records request for the video recording was blocked by they argued was blocked by security issues involving state law. So and again, I just did a spoliation letter with regards to an illegal traffic stop or illegal search of a vehicle where there was no probable cause to initiate not only the traffic stop, but there wasn't any probable cause to initiate an investigatory search that resulted in a full search of the vehicle. So and as we talked about 2 weeks ago, the use of the canines. We talked about the lack of records with respect to all of the. I think there are some systemic issues at JSO that I think need. I don't know if it requires a federal grand jury, but it needs some fresh eyes.
Let's start, if we can, just listen to a little bit about what the sheriff said at this press conference when he announced it, because I do want to talk a little bit more about the details of what we know, what happened.
Out of an abundance of caution, 8 corrections, officers and one corrections sergeant have been removed from their positions and stripped of all their corrections authority. They will all remain in this status until the conclusion of this investigation. When there is additional information that we can release without hampering the integrity of this investigation, that information will be publicly released.
So not much information there, but we do know that the man involved was a 31-year-old. He owned a food truck. His name was Charles Faggart. He was in jail on a $5,000 bond for a criminal mischief charge and a misdemeanor simple assault. Nate, your publication was the first to report that the bond actually had to be reduced so the family could visit him. He was hospitalized Monday. They weren't able to see him, I don't think, until Tuesday, you reported.
That is what the court records seem to indicate. I also think that's what the family's attorney has since said. Yeah, we don't know any of the information about Mr. Faggart because of anything JSO said. I mean, the sheriff's initial statement about this was, even by JSO standards, quite vague. And you know, as a journalist, and there are a couple of people around the table, including you, Ann, who have been in this racket long enough to have known a time when the police routinely shared quite a bit more about crimes and potential crimes without hampering investigations. And so I find myself frustrated with this explanation. You know, if you listen, I mean, the literal words that the sheriff was describing at that news conference, I guess we could have assumed that these officers were suspended because of a thing that happened to a person, but like, that's about all we knew.
Yeah.
I find that unacceptable. Clearly the identity of this man did not hamper any investigation. And so like, I think it's important for us to scrutinize when JSO just kind of throws up this blanket, we can't share anything. I mean, the fact of the matter is JSO shares information about active investigations quite often, particularly when they think that evidence puts JSO in a favorable light.
Tiffany, the sheriff saying that, you know, he is continuing his efforts of transparency. The push to bring in an outside investigative agency is certainly unusual. I've not ever seen the FBI. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys can recall.
We've actually tried to figure that out yesterday in our newsroom. And we'd asked JSO, you know, when was the last time the FBI was called to investigate a crime like this? And we were told, again, it was vague. We were told not under Sheriff T.K. Waters has this ever happened, but we don't track this information, so we can't tell you. But I think it was a general consensus in the newsroom that many people can't remember a time when something has been this serious to call the FBI in to investigate.
Carl Walden, the federal case?
Well, what I recall was the Safar case. And that was, I remember Sheriff Rutherford standing on the courthouse steps saying, we are bringing in the FBI to investigate what happened here. But nothing ever came of that.
Remind us that what the particulars of the Safar case were.
I'm trying, you know, I'm going back and forth remembering. But that was an incident where there were undercover officers involved in an investigation of a man that owned a not a fast food store, but a convenience store. And I know on Talleyrand, and they owned a number of stores, and there were problems involved there. The same thing. It might have been, and Jack, is what we were discussing that was under.
I think it was
Sheriff Glover, but it was Sheriff Rutherford that came out.
I recall it. I think it was Sammy Safer. Was that?
Sammy?
Yeah. And again, there were allegations that JSO officers, whether undercover or whatever, were shaken down, or were shaking down store owners or something like that.
Right.
And what happened to Safer? Safer wound up getting. I don't recall the details, but I do not think that resulted in any sort of federal investigation.
But they called for it at the time.
Yes.
And that came to mind when this happened. I was just like going, what? And as we had mentioned, I don't ever recall like FDLE. Like they always say, FDLE should come in and oversee some of the problems when officers are involved with JSO. But that's always been turned down. No, we're going to do this publicly. We're going to have our committees that they form.
Right.
Yet they stopped doing that.
I mean, JSO, typically handles these investigations internally. They could turn it over to FDLE, but of course, FDLE is now headed by a former, well, not, I shouldn't say it's headed by,
right.
but Former Sheriff Mike Williams has a senior position with the FDLE.
Yeah, there have been, over the years when these kind of like use of force incidents happen, when a cop shoots someone, activists, sometimes call for this, like that FDLE should be the investigating agency, or maybe the FBI should come in. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, I'm sensitive to the concern that there is this perception of JSO investigating itself, or, the state attorney's office doing the investigation. Well, the state attorney and the sheriff have a, pretty close working relationship. And the fact of the matter is FDLE is quite chummy with JSO as well. I mean, and I don't know that there's any evidence. FDLE handles these kinds of incidents in other places around Florida. I don't know that there's any evidence that FDLE conducts a more rigorous investigation than the state attorney's office does, or that they find police officers at fault more than any other kind of investigating agency. The benefit to having the state attorney's office doing it is, whether, you agree with their findings in the end or not, they do release very lengthy disposition reports that explain the facts of the case, the evidence, the legal questions that spring out of this incident, what their thinking was about it. You don't get that with, the feds. I mean, the concern that I have, and some of the questions that I have about this kind of vague thing, maybe the FBI is involved. Well, if the feds take this over, whatever that looks like, we're not getting a disposition report. If they file charges, we'll know. And if they don't, we won't hear about this again. And, there will be some civil litigation, but like, that's actually not transparent. Like, I don't know that people always are know what they're asking for in incidents like this.
Got a call from Kelly with the Northside Coalition. Good morning, Kelly. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
Hi, Kelly.
We at the Northside Coalition believe that there should be fewer people in jail, and to reduce the need for jail and the expenses, as well as save lives, we offered a 5-point plan. First, an adult civil citation program must be initiated to keep people out of jail. Second, the cash bail system must be reformed so bail is rarely imposed and that fewer people are in jail. Third, mental health co-responders must be available 24/7 in every zone to keep people with mental health issues out of jail. And fourth, an expanded group violence intervention program must be maintained to help prevent crime and provide people with positive options. Fifth, we must provide a Marshall Plan level of investment to underserved areas so that people have opportunities for meaningful work, affordable housing, high-quality education, and accessible health care so that fewer crimes of poverty and helplessness are committed.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it. Jim, so we don't know, obviously, what happened here. I mean, you hear some people talking as if this was a violent encounter. We know that there were injuries, according to the attorney representing the family, catastrophic injuries, but we don't know how they occurred, and we don't know what, if anything, happened between the corrections officers.
Well, and if you were, I'm just sitting here amazed if I was covering that press conference, and I'm sorry that I haven't, that video has not been released. And there has to be video. We've seen so much video from the jail. You remember the Sallyport incident where the woman was beaten by an officer. That video went viral. We've seen other video, other incidents that have happened in the jail. And I'm just going, so many officers involved. We don't know their names. Why not? We don't know what led up to this. Why not? I mean, we got to protect this investigation.
It's an unfalsifiable statement. I mean, it's just, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the term incident is what the sheriff used to describe what happened. And then you see news outlets using that term incident, and everyone's like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, that is what we were told. And when we asked him to elaborate, we're told it was bad enough that I had to come out and tell you guys about it. And that is to the extent of the information we have. So it's, and then you have the attorney for the family of this man, Charles Faggart, saying, we know there is video and we demand it. We want to see it.
I can't believe. And I've heard on news outlets where they talk to the ex-girlfriend of the man, and they're reporting that they were saying that he was beaten so bad that it was unrecognizable. And I'm just going, what could have possibly have led to something like this happening with so many corrections officers involved.
Somehow, I think the Tributary has already made a public records request for that video. Is that correct?
Yes, us and I'm sure every other news outlet. In town.
Yeah.
A couple of things about this incident too. I do want to sort of dwell on for a moment. One is, so we think that this happened Monday. We didn't get a news conference from JSO until Tuesday evening, and I'm curious why an entire day lapsed before we knew anything about this having happened. We also, the family's attorney also indicated in a statement yesterday that Mr. Faggart had been brain dead since Monday. And so that also makes me wonder, when JSO was giving this news conference Tuesday, I mean, I guess I'll grant the sheriff said that this guy was badly injured. He was effectively dead. And it seems to me like JSO probably was aware of that. I know just from the reporting that we did on this, I mean, there was an expectation Tuesday night that, Mr. Faggart was going to die. And so some of this makes me feel, I mean, how much of this story are we getting, and why is it taking so long? Again, for basic things that I just think common sense can tell you, having known a little bit more about this upfront would not have hampered any investigation. I just really, really question this broad use of that kind of, get out of jail free card, so to speak, when it comes to disclosing information to the public.
Jack.
Yeah, Nate made a point before, are we, I think the question you're posing is, are we better off with this handled being by the FDLE or JSO internally, because at least we'd have access to information, but versus the feds, the FBI, because again, we don't know what the FBI everything's going to be secretive and very quiet. But you know what? I don't think we really have any alternative but to rely upon the feds at this particular point, because FDLE and JSO, it's too close to home. So I mean, I would rather deal with a more secretive or protected investigation process than deal with one where I don't trust the integral due process structure of it. I'll just leave it at that.
Got a call from Daryl in St. Augustine. Good morning, Daryl. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. There's more crime committed inside the Duval County Jail than all of Duval County combined. I know because someone associated with me was put in there for a DUI and drugs, and I got a phone call. I needed to cash app $175 to this person, or the person inside the jail would not make it through the night. When the judge was told that, he did not care, put him back in the jail, and every night for the next 5 nights, I paid $175 for this person to make it through the night, as you would say. So there is extortion, there is drug dealing. Everybody from the jailers to the criminals are involved in it. It is a crime-infested. You couldn't. It's the most dangerous place in Duval County.
That's a quite a claim, Daryl. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't. That's new. Put that on the FBI's punch list at this point, right? I mean, that goes back to my earlier point, is that when they get in there and they start digging around, what's going to be the scope of this investigation?
Well,
that's troubling. I mean, that's and he sounds very, very. He's not making that up.
But we have heard of incidents like that that have been bogus. That, when you get that call like, oh, your grandson is in jail and you need to send this money, things like that. And once somebody falls for something like that, it continues and continues. That type of thing does happen.
I want to ask, Daryl, since you're still on the line, were you able to verify that with your friend or whoever it was that you were providing assistance for?
Oh, no, I did it. I put the money in there, and it was a court appearance the next morning. We told the judge about it. He did not care, put him back in there. I got another phone call each night for the next 3 nights, and each night I put money in the Cash App to
But
you
you're
know
you're
the
confident
person's.
that that money was a legitimate threat against your friend.
Oh no, the next day I was told that it did. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for clarifying that. Um, we do have to move on. I want to touch on a couple other headlines that were really significant this week. One that's going to impact a lot of people that caught food truck owners off guard and by surprise was the idea that they're going to be banned from operating within 300 feet of gas stations. Tiffany, that was something that they said, this is a key to our livelihood. Some lawmakers said it's an antidote to food deserts, that having food truck presences near where there, a lot of activity is important to these small businesses.
It is, and it passed, obviously. So what the concern is from food truck owners is where else are we going to set up where we can reach people? But I guess the reason this bill was introduced was a safety concern, having food trucks operating so close to gasoline, a fire hazard, right? But what one councilman suggested is that maybe we put funding to better regulate food trucks and check for safety guidelines. I mean, there's a lot of opinions about this story, right? And I think at the end of the day, who this hurts is local business owners. And they were very vocal about that, speaking with us personally, talking about how this is their livelihood. And I can't imagine there are many other places like a gas station where you would run into that many people looking for a bite to eat. And I think that they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and figure out, how they're going to make this work for their families.
Yeah. I mean, on some level, it seems just like a common sense, right? You don't want explosive things. There are fires at food trucks. We know there was an explosion at a very prominent food truck here just a couple of years ago that, severely injured the woman who owned it. So you don't want things that are exploding that are located near gas stations. But this one doesn't necessarily limit the distance because if it's on the property, there's a 300-foot setback. But if it's on an adjacent property within 300 feet, it's not limited.
Yeah, this sounds to me like somebody. This is bricks and mortar versus food trucks in my mind. I mean, it's like somebody was, again. Where did this bill come from? Somebody pick up the phone. Hey, listen, I got a problem. Constituent calls the council person, said, listen, this ain't right. This ain't right. You got to fix this problem. You got to fix this problem. Lo and behold, okay, what do you need to have happen? I need to have this happen. These food trucks are a nuisance. They're killing my business. All right, well, what's the rationale? Safety, 300. Okay, get it passed. But it doesn't really make any sense because, again, to your point, if it's on an adjacent property within 100 feet, it's okay. And, I just don't. Again, it's kind of like the school funding stuff in Tallahassee. It's like, all right.
Where did it become?
Yeah, follow the money.
Nate, I mean, having recently pumped my gas next to a gentleman who was smoking a cigarette, I can attest to the fact that you don't necessarily want, explosives near your gas pumping. But this does have impacts for people particularly in low-income communities because there's a lot of businesses that can't afford to set up a brick and mortar. This is their foothold in the business economy, and putting their business near a place where there's a lot of foot traffic is essential to their success.
Sure. I'm going to be honest with you. I, knew this topic was going to be a thing coming in. I have had a difficult time mustering any sort of strong feelings about this. I'm sure they'll figure out how to move their truck somewhere and
get your taco somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, this is one I've got to tap out on it.
This is a Nate can care less topic. Well, let's move on to one maybe you can rally some enthusiasm for, the sale of Regency Square Mall, which has been obviously a huge issue, a big blight on the Arlington neighborhood for a long, long time. 58-year-old mall is now going to have a new owner, and it looks like it's going to be multi-residential, multi-family, some businesses, a bunch of new out parcels planned. Jim, this is a business, though, that faced almost $2 million in municipal code violations. I'm curious what you think is going to happen to that debt.
Well, I remember going into Regency Mall, first off, in its heyday, and wow, it was great. And then we're watching malls just disintegrate right in front of us. What's going on? Going into Regency Mall, I think when I was last working at Channel 4 and just seeing the one area that used to be around the fountain and the food court. That's all that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they plan to do here, great. In my opinion, it's going to make a change to what happened there. But again, you have this promise of residential housing, businesses, or some type of retail going on. is it really going to happen? I mean, that promise is being made in so many places around Jacksonville that we're going to see this, and I'm just going, okay, and we're just going to see those same square apartments go up for rent that were going to happen there, and it's going to be there in Regency.
Yeah, well, it is a building that, I think a lot of people were surprised for a long time, Tiffany, that it could remain as it was. I mean, the ceiling was falling in. There was no air conditioning. There was mold. There was, no electrical service in parts of them. I mean, it was kind of in a shambles and still operating.
Oh yeah, you name it, there is a problem. Who would want to shop there, right? Let alone work there. So it's much needed for the Arlington area. But to Jim's point, we kind of holding our breath to see, is this really going to happen? Because we see those renderings all the time, right? But multifamily housing is an interesting concept for a mall.
Well, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks, you guys, this week for coming this week. Tiffany Salome, Jim Piggott, Jack Webb, Nate Monroe. Really appreciate you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we'll talk about a fundraiser
Korean Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congaree-and-pen.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One texter call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. Riverside Avondale Preservation presents the 51st Annual Home Tour on April 12th and 13th. Featuring 12 properties and 9 architectural styles in support of preserving historic Jacksonville neighborhoods. Tickets available at 904tix.com.
The Jacksonville Music Experience presents indie rock band Shannon and the Clams, performing live on the WJCT soundstage on Saturday, April 12th at 7 p.m. Tickets and more information at jacksmusic.org/JME events.
On the next Florida Roundup, what does 0.75% mean to you? A measure to cut the state sales tax by that amount is making its way through the state legislature. That sales tax on your receipts could go down, saving 75 cents for every $100 you spend. That may not sound like a lot, but what could it add up to for your household budget? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then join us Friday noon until 1.
This week, a U-turn on tariffs.
They were getting yippy. They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
What caused Trump to change his mind? Also, who are his latest targets for revenge? Elsewhere in the Capitol, D.C. gets ready to celebrate an NHL record breaker. More on the Roundup next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. The work of defending the poor from injustice is a full-time job, but those doing it get a break this weekend, along with their supporters at the second annual Justice Jam. Here to tell us about it is Heidi Kemp, Deputy Director of Three Rivers Legal Services Incorporated. Start us off, Heidi. First of all, tell us about the work of Three Rivers. We've had someone from Three Rivers on here previously to talk about some housing issues, but your scope of work is much larger than housing.
Oh, yes, it is much larger than housing. So Three Rivers actually has been around for 47 years, and we cover 17 different counties in North Florida. We cover a variety of areas such as housing challenges. We handle elder support, veteran services, consumer protection. We have a large heirs property project, which ties in with housing issues because it allows us to clear title and help pass down property for generations of families.
So you do the work for people who are low income or indigent.
Yes, all of our clients are poverty level, low income, that need legal services in the civil arena, where we do not have a right to a lawyer. Unlike criminal cases where you can have a public defender appointed, you don't have that in the civil cases, so we handle those cases.
And so Florida is unique in terms of the money that it does, or in this case doesn't provide for civil legal services, which is, why fundraising events like the one we're going to talk about are important. But can you just remind us what the dynamic is in Florida and how that's different from other states in terms of the services that they make available to people who are poor or indigent?
So we're talking about the funding issues in the state of Florida.
For like legal aid services.
Right. We receive through the Bar Foundation. We do not receive money through the legislature like so many other states do. I think we're one of two, as stated, that do not receive through a budget. So we receive through Florida Bar Foundation. And it is a good way for us to receive funding because we are not incumbent upon the legislature and the things like that and having to go ask for money and worry about budget cuts because that's a really, stressful situation.
That's an interesting perspective. I've heard people argue that, it should be a regular allocation, but you're saying it sort of frees you from the political process.
It does free us from that.
Interesting. So the fundraiser, though, this is the second annual Justice Jams. Tell us a little bit about the event that's this weekend.
I'm sorry, it's in May. It's May 15th.
Oh, is that right? Okay, so it's the open house that's happening.
Oh, so on April 17th, we're having an open house. Yes, we
Okay.
have the two things are tied together. 2 years ago, we started a capital campaign, and through that capital campaign, we did fundraising events to raise money, and the funds from those events were used to purchase a building for our Jacksonville office. We have been in Jacksonville for 21 years. We have been renting, but increased rent costs, we have decided that it would be more cost effective actually for us to go ahead and purchase a building. So we went ahead and through fundraising events over the last 3 years in our capital campaign, we have gone ahead and purchased a building, and we are holding a ribbon cutting event on April 17th, and that will be at the new location.
I gotcha. And so that's on Beach Boulevard. That's on April 17th, but that was funded in part by this Justice Jam, and there is a second annual, I guess, scheduled.
Yes, there is. It's on May 15th, and it'll be at the Garden Club of Jacksonville. And that is one of our, that is the main fundraising event that we started out with when we started our capital campaign that has helped facilitate the purchase of this building. We're going to have music by the Firewater Tent Revival, food by Mission Barbecue. There'll be some auctions and raffles. It's a really good time. It's a beautiful venue.
So that's how people can support Three Rivers and their work. What if people need to access it? How do people reach you if they need help in the civil legal world?
The easiest way to do it is to go to our website, which is www.trls.org. And through that, you can do an online application through services, and it will go through our process, and a appointment or a contact will be made through our legal helpline. And there are attorneys on our legal helpline who may be able to, depends on the level of service needed, and that we could go ahead and either assist them on the helpline or they will be assigned to a attorney to handle a case.
And so if somebody knows someone who needs help, are you required to talk to the person who would be the client, or if it's a family member that's trying to get help for an elderly or disabled, relative, are they able to kind of initiate that contact with you?
They can call in and then go ahead and get the process started on we'll talk with them and see what the needs are, because some people, especially disabled individuals or people that have some handicaps, they may need some assistance. So we certainly appreciate the help of family and friends who are willing to help take care of that.
Well, Heidi Kemp, we certainly appreciate the work that you all do. Thanks so much for coming in here today.
Thank you so much.
All right. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have questions or comments, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything today, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to join us Saturday at 4 when neurologist Dr. Joe Servin talks to a woman whose genetic mutation and uncertain future inspired her to help others. That's on What's Health Got to Do with It on Saturday at 4. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our producer is Stacey Bennett. Our director is Brady Corum, and Jamie Valet is our associate producer. The theme music for First Coast Connect is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us Monday when attorneys and educators Nick Allard and Rick Mullaney discuss how the president's legal challenges are impacting the courts and everyday Americans. I'm Ann Schindler, and you've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR.